Hey, how's it going? So welcome to our first. Oh, talked over you. My bad. So welcome to our first live AMA of the year. My name is Josh. Since I'm new, I'll introduce myself. Some of you may not know me, but I've been with the Theta team for a few months now as head of marketing and PR. I've been in the industry for 5 or 6 years now, worked with a few clients from asset managers to privacy protocols, layer 2s, A to Z. And, I'm really excited to be working with Theta at such an important time for the company, especially for AI infrastructure. I know the previous X Space with George Telecom was not recorded, but I can promise this one is being recorded. So apologies for that.
Hey guys, good to see everybody. It's good to be live with everyone again. It's been a little while, so yeah, really excited to get into it.
Hey, Jay here. So likewise, glad to get on the camera and meet with the community online.
Yep, same. Looking forward to connect with the community again. Coming in late for you guys from Amsterdam, but had a couple coffees before, so I'm in good shape, ready to connect.
It's a first-time record for four of us online, in the stream. So this is going to be exciting.
Awesome. Should we jump in?
Let's do it.
Awesome. Question number 1, I believe, is very important, very topical. So given the state of the overall economy with geopolitical issues, etc., how do you feel about the crypto industry in the next 12 to 18 months, guys?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to jump in first and talk about how I feel. Even though we sometimes have our narrow focus on Theta and what we're building, everyone knows that how the crypto market and how the crypto industry in general is going affects us a lot, like any other project. So last few months have been pretty tough. It feels like we've been taking some hits, sort of not really the fault of the crypto space, but with war in Iran and just general sentiment going down for a lot of risk assets. But I feel pretty good compared to a lot of, I'd say, crashes or crypto winters we've seen before. Now, obviously, we've been through a lot of them, even just at Theta. It's been, coming up on 8 years now. And well, the first few weeks, it felt like, this world go on forever and crypto prices are going to plummet. It seemed to be stabilizing. I mean, dropping to 70,000 for Bitcoin as a reference marker feels pretty mild compared to some of the drops we've seen before. Theta price itself has been up about 22% in the last week. So it seems like we have bottomed out. And I don't know, I've seen a lot of these where it feels like the markets get very jittery when the events are happening, but after a few weeks of it gets priced in, things stabilize, and then you're kind of in a good place to go forward. And then, we'll see some of the positive things start getting taken to by the market instead. Like, we'll talk. We saw another question about this we could touch on later, but in the middle of all this conflict, people didn't even notice that the SEC and CFTC basically gave complete positive guidance for tokens, including ones like Theta, T-Field, T-Drop, where it's very clear that they have a positive framework for it and not a considered a security by any means. So it's easy to be a prisoner of the moment, but I think the positive things are still going on in the background, and we're going to start to see that as the market lifts up again.
Yeah, I think we're being realistic, and we're pretty optimistic about the future. I think behind the scenes, we've been heads down, doing a lot of development from a technical standpoint, developing relationships with customers, existing and new customers, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But I guess my take is similar. I think this particular drawdown, I think in the last 4 or 5 months, it's really October 10th, right? It's been very significant. I think it's been probably one of the fastest compared to the past few cycles, which means that I hope when some of these geopolitical, some of these different things that's really out of our control kind of settles down, that will be on the way up on a faster pace as well. So, but in any case, I think it's a good time, I think, really for us to keep executing, and we'll be sharing a bunch of stuff with you guys today.
Oh yeah, just want to echo Wes and Mitch's thought. Obviously not a financial advice, but as Mitch mentioned, since October last year, right, the market has been, crypto market in particular, was on a downtrend. But since the Iranian war started, right? So people have been saying the BTC and the crypto market as a whole, held up relatively well compared to gold and equity market, right? So which gives us some hope that maybe the bottom is forming, and then maybe the bounce back will come at some point, and maybe this is actually happening as of today, right? If you look at the market in the past few days, price of Bitcoin and equity have been bouncing back for now. So,
Yeah. I mean, there's so much asset rotation that comes into play when the investors are quick to change the narrative. Like when gold was more stable in the first days of these last few months of volatility, and Bitcoin was crashing, people were ready to write the 1,000th obituary of crypto, that it's not really a safe haven in these times. And then gold dropped 20% in a matter of weeks. And then all of a sudden they completely reverse the narrative and say, well, Bitcoin is actually the more stable. We got to get out of gold. So it can change quickly back to the positive for sure.
100%. If that's everything on that question, we can move on to something I know the community really cares about, and it's very important. So, I'll be frank, what is the current status of the lawsuits? How do you feel about it? And is it looking good? Are you confident?
Yeah, I know at least a few people, and quite a few people in the community have been, concerned and worried about this. I want to just kind of share, a few things, although I can't really comment in a lot of detail about ongoing litigation. It is unfortunate, I think, that disgruntled ex-employees are trying to damage the project and damage the community. False allegations, completely baseless claims. As a company, we're defending ourselves, and we'll do so until the very end. We feel really good about it. I think it's going to be a very positive outcome. So, for us, it's business as usual. As you know, the lawyers are behind the scenes doing their work. And for us, it's just, we keep executing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Next question. What is the current status of EdgeCloud's roadmap, AI, OpenClaw, etc., and rendering/gaming services?
Oh yeah, great question. So yeah, I'm going to take it. So the team has been keeping heads down and working on a couple areas that is indicated by the roadmap we published, earlier this year, right? So first thing is a new product, what we call is the gaming service, which is an AI-powered gaming engine for NPCs in the games, right? So it can generate a dialogue, but not just that, but also maybe the gesture and the next move of the NPC characters in the game world. So yeah, I'm not able to share too much at this moment, but it's looking pretty good in shape. And then hopefully we'll be able to share a sneak peek and then release the initial version pretty soon. So there's a new product. But in the meanwhile, the team is working on enhancing the core of the product, which is the training and inference engine, right? So the goal there is to provide inference services for ultra large LLMs, and then with lower end-to-end latency and very high throughput. So we recently released the Minimax M2.5 and GPTOS 120B, right, as a on-demand services. So those are ultra large LLMs, like with hundreds of billions of parameters, and be able to serve that, as they indicate, it's a proof that we are on the right track to put on the largest LLM, open source LLM on the Theta network. And then I want to mention that this optimization is across the board, and not just for the high-end H200s, but also for the community RTX GPUs, right? So we are hoping that with the effort, we'll be able to host a spectrum of open source LLMs from the largest one to a smaller one. So, both are highly useful for AI agents. And then some of them will be hosted in the data center GPUs, but a lot of them will be running on community RTX nodes, and then hopefully be able to push more inference jobs to the community and be able to let the community to earn more TFU in the process, right? And then moving up the stack, then we have the AI agent right, at the application layer. So we're implementing a few ideas following the latest AI agent trend, which is called the harness engineering. So for the technical folks in the audience, right, you might be noticing that term recently. It's very trendy on X and other kind of developer forum. So notably, the OpenClaw, right, which is really a hot topic in itself, and also the leaked cloud code, right? So those source code, they are following the same pattern. So we're trying to get a few the core idea from those product, and then inspired by that to add some new capability to our AI agent backend to make it more generic, and then so that it's easier for us to customize it for not just the pro sports, esports, but potentially in the future for more industry verticals, right? Those are the application front. But also I saw a lot of questions submitted about asking the new hardware support, that whether EdgeCloud client can run on Apple or AMD's hardware in the future. So it is a case that currently we're focusing on NVIDIA GPUs because it has the largest market share, but we do acknowledge that a lot of people right there are running AMD or using a Mac or a MacBook. So as the platform gets more mature, so we will, we might start looking into those alternative hardware and see that whether it is feasible, right, to port the system over to those platforms.
Yeah, no, that's great summary, JE. I just wanted to just emphasize the one point that a lot of the team is focused on optimizations. A lot of these models, particularly to run on our distributed EdgeCloud clients, right? So these are the nodes that run by the community, by you guys. That's really important differentiation, and we'll come back to that a little bit more, how we're looking at a bunch of different partnerships and how we're planning to leverage that.
Awesome. Again, this is a question which is important for the community and for us. It's about looking at the horizon and what's next. So question 3, what does Theta see as key for mainstream adoption, and what milestones need to be hit before that becomes a reality?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Josh. And I think it's important for us to kind of, first and foremost, we view Theta as and the network as infrastructure, right? So it's an infrastructure first and foremost for GPU compute, for agentic AI applications and enterprise applications, right? So somewhat in that order, right? That's kind of our focus. And so the market, if you look at the market today, it's still primarily dominated by the hyperscalers, right? The existing big cloud providers like Google, AWS. And we provide an alternative, right? This is kind of what I was echoing in the last question. The distributed element, computing at the edge, these consumer grade RTXs, the 3090s, 4090s, and the 5090s now, provide much higher scalability at much lower price. And that's really important because of this new segment of neoclouds, which is emerging, which we wrote a blog piece about a few months ago. And frankly, a lot of the traditional, if you look at a lot of the traditional Bitcoin mining companies, which are public companies today, they have transitioned over the last 18, 24 months, from Bitcoin mining into AI compute. This whole sector is on the verge of hypergrowth, really within the next 18, 24 months. And it's essentially, these companies are providing a super easy and a real simple interface for AI developers, on one end, to enterprise AI customers on the other end, to be able to train, deploy, these AI models in these various different types of applications. So really, in the next 18, 24 months, I think the killer application, not really an application, but it's really about inference. And you're gonna hear a lot more about that over and over in the industry. And we're talking to a number of partners, and that key milestone that I think that needs to be hit, that's going to be a huge game changer in our industry, is inference, and be able to do inference at scale, and be able to do inference at the edge, edge devices, mobile devices, IoT devices, certainly PCs, right? Consumer grade GPUs.
Oh yeah, so Mitch pointed out, inference will be the trend, right? Will be the key for the next 12 to 24 months. I cannot agree more, because a biggest consumption, of those inference token, where does it go? It is the AI agent, right? So you guys are hearing OpenClaw and all the coding agents, and maybe you guys are actually using one to develop your own product, but not just product, right? But for every for people has no engineering background, they're able to use that to let's say more efficiently handle a lot of tasks, right? Which they cannot do it before efficiently. So we hear a lot of story. Someone so and so just need some kind of game for his kid, right? But or his or her kid, then he was able to vibe coding, right, through a natural language to make this game in maybe 10, 20 minutes, right, and have fun with it. So, and then as a result, in the past few months, we really see an explosion in the LLM token consumption, driven by OpenClaw and all these coding agents. And then I think as a platform, right, we should capitalize on this opportunity and be able to provide scalable and also cheap inference services, which will fuel all these agents, right? In particular, with our compute network, formed by not just the centralized cloud computer, a data center GPUs, but also from the GPU resources from the community.
Yeah, it's definitely a shift that favors EdgeCloud, in my opinion, because not that there wasn't some use in the training side of things in EdgeCloud. There was some university partners that were training their own models on EdgeCloud, but still, that is an aspect of AI that favors the massive centralized data centers. If you need just the sheer power of an entire data center at once to train these models. But in hindsight, the last year or two, that's because the consumer demand for AI just wasn't there yet. So there was a lot more training going on than there was inference, but that's really changed now. You're starting to see with Claude Code and the enterprise tools that are rolling out, like every white collar firm in the world is starting to have a serious demand for tokens on the inference side. And that's just going to get more and more. So it definitely is going to help for EdgeCloud, where it is better suited for inference, if that's where the trend is going in demand for tokens.
Right.
Yeah, all really good points. To kind of wrap up from my point of view, and then Jay, you can jump in. The model a few years ago was like train one big model, and that requires a certain amount of a certain type of infrastructure. Like the guys have said, now it's more inference, it's model customization, it's agentic workloads. So you'll see more diversity there, and that's where EdgeCloud is going to shine over the next kind of 18, 24 months. It's not your frontier labs that are kind of consuming all of the demand, right? It's small enterprises, it's kind of consumers, and we have that flexibility.
Right, exactly. So, and then one of the pain point, right? A lot of the agent AI users is the cost, right? You think about this AI agent, they actually consume a huge amount of tokens, because if you use ChatGPT, maybe there's a direct interaction between you and the LLM in the backend, but the AI agent, they have huge context, right? Because they need to pull all the history and also a lot of skills and other things into their context. And each interaction consumes, a huge amount of token that is unimaginable by, a regular user of ChatGPT. So in this case, then if you use only GPT or Claude, then the bill will scare you. But in this case, as an alternative, then if we can run really cheap and scalable inference using a decentralized network, then at least for some tasks, right, doesn't require the frontier model, then maybe there's a much cheaper and much more economic alternative that we can provide.
Awesome. Next question is, what is the role of telecom partners like Deutsche Telekom within the Theta ecosystem? And what is the business model being pursued with them? We had a few questions on this. So who wants to start?
Well, I could speak directly to Deutsche Telekom since I met those guys at Theta Eurocon. Got to know a good sense of what they're looking for at EdgeCloud, and it can vary partner by partner. But one thing that's really interesting with Deutsche Telekom is they have their traditional cloud service, and the traditional customer base, primarily German enterprises and German consumers to a lesser extent, but they really like the idea of taking the valuable network they built and realizing this is something that could be in demand around the world, especially as cloud compute gets more and more globalized. They're not thinking just in terms of their last 50 years customers, but customers around the world. So one of the things we've talked about with them, if we can work out some of the international complexities when it comes to legal services contracts, is they really like that we have demand from the US, from Asia, around the world at different types of customers that they can be a supplier of compute and GPU power to. So that's one angle that's very interesting, is we've got traction and building up a customer base that could be attractive to some of the big players in the industry that would then want to be on the supply side of EdgeCloud.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And in a lot of these cases, right, Wes, we talk a lot about this. A lot of our initial conversation relationship with these telcos start at the validator level, right? So it's really them participating in the blockchain, or layer one, first and foremost, right? Having into AI infrastructure, which is a strategic area for them. So them coming on board and helping us really validate and secure the network is really important, because it means that they have a vested interest, right, in our success and leveraging our blockchain. That's really important piece, right? It's not just about AI; it's really about the intersection of AI and blockchain. And with one partner, for instance, that we're speaking to, another very large telco, some part of Europe, which we haven't yet announced. Really excited about this one. We haven't, the deal's not yet done, so we can't disclose it. But what they have is, just like every other telco, they have, thousands, potentially tens of thousands of points of presence at the edge, namely cell towers, which is spread out throughout the country. And what's interesting about these cell towers is they're really edge devices, if you think about them, right? Because it's got a physical location, right? It's got that, whatever, 5x5 or 10x10, area, which is allocated. It's got a lot of power, right? Because it needs that in order to do its job. And so what's interesting here is that we're talking to them about potentially doing a POC and seeing if we can turn some of these cell towers into a specific GPU processing node for AI inference to begin with. One of the challenges that we've been talking about is that, from a hardware standpoint, they have very limited RAM, which is, required by a lot of these models. Although there's even that, there's been a lot of recent changes, developments. And, one, I don't know if you guys heard, but Google just released one of their new models. It's the Gemini 3 derivative. I believe it's called Gamma 4. And apparently, though, that particular model has been highly compressed, using really sophisticated math, and can now run on some mobile and some IoT devices. So that's, these kinds of developments are really exciting for us. When it comes to these telecoms, they're really looking at how do they leverage their existing infrastructure, their investments that they've made over the last, 10, 20, 30 years plus, and how do they then, leverage that to their advantage, right? Because there is so much competition, so many players in that space. And this is kind of where we come in, right? With our decentralized, distributed node expertise, right? The software we built that Jay and the team has built, particularly around optimizing and routing these different types of jobs. That's very interesting. So that's another element with these big telcos. That's one of the reasons that we're focusing on them as part of our enterprise push.
Awesome. Another important question, and this speaks to real third-party demand. Are EdgeCloud jobs from third-party demand, or is Theta issuing jobs to test and calibrate the network? Jay.
Oh yeah, so it's an important question. I do want to acknowledge that a fraction of the jobs right, are calibration job for scalability and reliability of the network, right? But they're important on their own rights because it's making sure the system is battle tested, right, and can handle really high loads, right? But on top of that, we do see overall increasing daily consumption and requests for the on-demand API, so which is encouraging sign. And also, as always, the academic customers, right, they are kind of fighting for those GPUs, be the high-end H200, or sometimes they also use the community-provided RTX GPUs, right, especially before the conference deadline. So yeah, those are the time that maybe we see very high utilization of our resources.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that if you look at our network, we have more supply than demand, right? In some respect, right? That we have a lot more of these consumer grade RTXs, which some of you are running, and we're going to see a lot more usage and utility of that, which also is an important component, right? Which we'll touch on a little bit more later in terms of the role of TFIO and T-drop. But as we onboard more enterprise customers, there's going to be more demand. And a lot of these strategic partners, these infrastructure, what we call infrastructure partners, is very interested in tapping into this distributed network. A recent inclusion, I think, in the GPU marketplaces, right? GPUs.io, and is another very large marketplace that we're currently submitted our information, and hopefully will be announced.
There's a few.
Announced soon. Yep, there's a few, but this one in particular is very exciting because it really gives us the visibility, and that will put us in front of a lot more AI developers.
Yep. And speaking of the community GPUs, right? So as you might have noticed that in the past few months, we put a lot of effort into testing the model quantization and compression, right? So the goal is that for them to be able to host it by the community GPU. So we are also in the back kind of using some of the open source software to develop a new tech. So where it's not just a single GPU will host a model, but multiple community GPU can collaboratively, host a large model where each GPU only load a fraction of the parameters, right? And then so that in this way, then in aggregate, the community GPU will be able to host not just the Llama 3 like 8 billion model, but a much larger one, right? So this is some ongoing work behind the scene, and we are really testing some of the cutting edge model kind of offer by some, a name hyperscaler, right? So we're working behind the scene. So, but hopefully we'll be able to release more details soon.
Awesome. Very specific question here. We had this one a few times as well, and it refers to something we put in a white paper at one point, which one I can't remember. When do Elite Booster rewards approach the 14 to 28% APR forecasted in the white paper?
Yeah, that's really a good question, and just a quick recap for community members. So this is referring to an Elite Booster, right? The Elite Booster APR, and the way that you calculate that APR is a little bit tricky, right? If you remember that in order to qualify, you need to essentially top up to the 500,000 TFIO, which kind of opens up or enables these booster rewards, which is now really a combination of sort of two rewards, right? There's a base staking reward of staking TFIO, right, which earns TFIO, and then there's an additional reward in terms of TNT20 tokens on top of TFIO, right, for jobs which are completed on the EdgeCloud platform.
Right. So as Mitch mentioned, there's two components. One, the base reward, a staking reward. The other is the job reward. I think the staking reward is about, give you about 3 to 4%, give or take, right, return. And on top of that, it will be plus the value of TFIO and TNT20 token like Grove and T-drop and Levita, right? So, but unfortunately, as we I mentioned earlier, that since last October, the whole crypto market has been on a downtrend, and then some of the TNT20 tokens value actually it has been fallen more than TFIO, right? so that during this process, then it also affects the APR, right? So since we're using the 500K TPU as a basis, if the TNT20 token value, compared to TPU went down even further, then unfortunately it will affect the APR, right? So altogether, we are seeing probably the APR currently is about 7 to 10% roughly in the range. So still shy of the 14% target. But let's say hopefully that we are seeing the recovery in the market, and then if that's the case, then at some point this APR should just increase again.
The next question is a really meaty one. Can the team share business metrics like paying customers, revenue ranges, ARR, and GPU utilization?
It's a really, really important question, and one that we're trying to provide more transparency. And so I want to really take advantage of our live stream today and kind of share some specific statistics, and then we'll think about longer term how to make a lot of this more transparent. But generally speaking, in terms of paying customers and revenue ranges, last year, which was 2025, which was our first full year after the launch of the EdgeCloud platform, we had approximately about $1 million in revenues, right, for the EdgeCloud platform. We expect the ARR, or the annual recurring revenue, to probably triple to 5x that, so 3 to 5 million in the next 12 to 18 months. And I think that's a realistic projection. Potentially, it's a little bit on the lower side, but there's potentially upside to that. And a big part of that is that a lot of the trial customers that we have today will be converting to paying. As you know, we have a little over 50 spread between universities and sports and esports teams. And with the universities in particular, it's very standard in our industry, right? If you work with hyperscalers like Google, AWS, everyone provides some level of trial credits. And a lot of these credits are now being used up and in process of converting them to paying customers over the next cycle, right? These credits are expiring. So that, combined with a lot of the sports deals that you guys know of, which have in the past largely been on value exchange, right? So rather than them paying or to use our EdgeCloud platform, whether it's $100,000 or $300,000 for the platform licensing and the inference, those are offset against promotion and marketing and sponsorships. So those deals are now expiring and renewing. So we're really kind of factoring all those things, and we have a really good starting base, and that's going to be reflected, right, in our recurring revenue moving forward. So hopefully that shares a little bit more the visibility for everybody out there. I know it's something that everyone's been asking for quite a while. We're also working on a bunch of new initiatives. Can't get into just because we're under NDA. But if they do pan out, then you'll probably find a lot of these metrics, revenue, AR, customers, etc., much more visible in various reporting requirements and whatnot. And again, we'll share those with you and with the community when those deals are done and we're ready to do that.
Thank you. A more of a market-based question, and I know one that the Theta community has been asking a lot about. Theta has underperformed BTC and others like Link and XRP. How does the team explain this, and what concrete catalyst will reverse it?
Oh, fun one. I know I always say the market stuff, so I can speak first on this. But yeah, I mean, it's no surprise, obviously, that it's been tough as a Theta holder, itself like everyone else, that Theta has underperformed. Now, compared to BTC, that's really all alts underperformed BTC in a down market. But yeah, Theta struggles as well. And having been with it through many cycles, I've seen Theta just simply as a high beta asset compared to a lot of crypto assets. For those of you who know the market parlance, when the market is down, Theta is down a lot. When the market is up, Theta is a very high performer. So I think it's been a bit of a victim of that. You see that and the rebound this last week, like I said, Theta is up 22%, which is much better than the average token. So like many of the bear markets, it's been a painful one for Theta, especially. But I expect that to when that reverses and market sentiment goes back up, Theta tends to roar back with the best of them, especially if we combine that with some of the catalysts that we that have lined up as we're boosting the EdgeCloud's capabilities. At the same time, we think AI inference demand is going to go through the roof. So it's long, I guess, TLDR. It's no secret that it's been a rough, they'll call it 12 months for Theta, but I think it's going to be just as good the opposite way once the market roars back.
The 2026 roadmap focuses on sports and esports AI agents. What is Theta's strategy to compete in other enterprise AI verticals? I know, Jay, you touched on this earlier. So of all of us, who wants to go first?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So we're definitely focusing on enterprise AI, right? That's a huge segment, and it's one of the largest growing profitable segment. And to us, that starts with these global telcos, right, which we already talked about, but also, again, I touched on earlier, these large data centers or bare metal providers, because they're going through a huge transition, and the compute marketplaces, the AI marketplaces I mentioned as well. Now, the common theme among all three of these groups is that they serve many different vertical industries. This is like a B2B, right? Because they have customers in supply chain or finance or healthcare or whatever industry, right, that they're focused on. These data center, the bare metal companies that we're talking to, and many of them have secured some very large multi-billion-dollar GPU contracts, right, on the demand side. I think, and we think here, that a lot of them will have a hard time delivering on those commitments, right? A bunch of different reasons: the cost, the complexity of the build out, a lot of risks sourcing the GPU, the fact that they have to refactor a lot of their underlying Bitcoin mining infrastructure to be able to do AI and to do AI well. It's not just about power. Power is one big component of that. So there's a bunch of different challenges. And I think this is where we see there's some really interesting complementary value in terms of what they're building out, which is these high-end cloud GPUs and our network, distributed, right, RTXs. And that's really Theta's value. So I can't emphasize that enough. And I think we touched on the last few questions. Jay was talking about that as well. But the distributed network is one that we're really doubling down. The scalability, the cost side. But I think that's where we will also see a big change, right, in terms of the token economics, right? If we are able to execute on this, then TFIO will be a really significant part of this infrastructure, this equation.
Oh yeah. So speaking of new verticals, I briefly touch upon kind of gaming, right? So we have an upcoming AI-powered game engine, which will power the NPCs in the game. So yeah, this is really an exciting new sector we are exploring, because given our background in gaming. So if you guys have been following us long enough, right, you probably know that before Theta Labs that we were in this VR space and working with a lot of kind of esports teams and event organizer, right? So it's kind of good to go back into our roots and provide new tools and capability, right, for the gaming industry, right? So that's one. The other is still agentic AI. So especially given explosion of OpenClaw, right? Then trying to extend the capability of our AI agent backend to be able to adopt some of the newest technology in this agentic AI, so that to make it more generic and powerful, so that we can customize our agent backend, right, to cater not just towards the pros and esports team, but also other verticals, as you can imagine, right? So almost every website right now needs a AI agent chatbot somewhere, right? So that can answer users' question with like in airline industry or hotel industry or anything you can think of. So there's definitely a huge market.
I can jump in here. So we've touched on this earlier. Mitch said it a couple of questions ago. A real focus, particularly for me at the moment, is making EdgeCloud as a product more visible. So we're competing alongside the other infra providers. We have a really strong offer on price, on quality of service. The more usage the network gets, the better it is for everyone, right? It's better for customers, it's better for node operators, it's better for token holders. That's a big priority. And the website redesign has been a huge part of that, right? We've acknowledged, and I said this on my DT X Space a couple of weeks ago, in the past, our messaging has been muddled. And now we have consolidated that, and our kind of offer to the market is now very clear, right? So what you're going to see over the next few weeks and months is us improving that more. There's more changes to the website. We're going to see, ad campaigns. You're going to see more activity on EdgeCloud, and more visibility on these marketplaces, these third parties, so that people who are looking for GPUs to rent find us very quickly, even quicker than they can now. Awesome. Anyone else?
No, I think we're good.
Awesome. Okay, so another market one. If a bear market persists until 2030, how long can Theta Labs stay in business? And has the team explored external investment outside tokens? Important.
Yeah, a very, very important question. And the answer is yes. In addition to the token funding operations, right, we're also looking at various investment options, right, including an external equity round of financing, which is very standard of high growth startups in our space. We're based here in Silicon Valley. Before we even did our token, right, we had raised a seed and Series A from a number of different investors, right, including some of our closest partners like Samsung, Sony, traditional Silicon Valley VCs. So we are looking at potentially raising another round, which is an equity investment. And that's really important piece of the equation here, because the equity, of course, is not the same as the tokens. And we love this possibility because it means that there isn't any dilution to the token value. I think on the contrary, it could be highly additive, right? Since essentially it adds to the token value because we can fund, long-term operations and, more marketing, more R&D, more sales, and invest in the future, right? By selling, equity, right, in the company. But in many of these options that we're exploring now, there's a significant sort of strategic alignment as well. Some of these potential investors, have some sort of AI initiative today, and they're all essentially, hyperscaler-like types of investments, right, with data centers and centralized, AI platforms, and there once again, right, what's interesting is bringing our distributed architecture, our distributed business model, back into what they're building. So I think the team is highly focused, and given the bear market that we're in, we're looking at all the options, right? So it'll be probably next 12, 18 months will be a combination of equity and token, but long term, I think it's gonna play out in a bunch of different ways.
Great. Question 11. In light of the recent SEC/CFTC statement, what category are Theta's tokens expected to fall into, and are there ongoing discussions? So I can provide some context here. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, the SEC and the CFTC released a joint statement on crypto. The main point of the statement was to sort crypto into these clearer categories, right? I think everyone can agree in the past few years we've had, particularly under Gensler, there just wasn't that clarity. one of the big issues that's been resolved is what counts as a security versus what counts as a commodity. One of the big driving factors behind the taxonomy is substance over labels. It's also been about aligning with regulators so that we have a more predictable environment for companies like ours, and basically more structure and consistency across the board. But yeah, I think maybe Wes, this is one for you or whoever.
Yeah. Having been in the trenches here with these, thankfully never a direct investigation with the SEC, but yeah, every project that came out when we did lived under the fear of that for many years. And step one, under this new administration, new SEC, it was pretty clear from the beginning that it was not going to be that cloud was finally lifted, and they weren't going to be going after individual token projects any longer. But this is still a much more important further step because they gave clear guidance as to the different categories of how they view crypto assets, and explicitly said if for the different categories, the one Theta would almost certainly, or T-Field, T-Drop, et cetera, will almost certainly fall into is the utility token category. And they outright said that's not a security to them unless it happens to be that you bolted on very security-like features. Like if you said you have contractual dividends, they'd say, okay, well, you just created preferred equity. Then it is a security if you made it just like a security. But absent that, virtually all utility tokens will not be considered securities, which was a big fear for us for many years. So I think that's really exciting, especially in light of what Mitch was saying about going out to institutional VCs and other investors like that, because a lot of them, in meetings throughout the years, they would just say, okay, this is interesting, guys, but maybe it's a little too early for us. We're not investing in something where we don't even know if it's legal or not. And even if the venture fund may be a little braver about that, they've got LPs that are teachers' funds, pension funds, these kind of things. So they have to answer to that. A lot of them just don't want to touch it if they don't even know that this is something okay within the law. So it's a big step to see this codified and get the real seal of approval from the biggest regulators in the world, the most important financial regulators in the world. And I think that'll carry through and filter through with the investors that we talk to going forward.
Yeah, good answer. We've had a few on this. It's very topical. Has the team considered any post-quantum cryptography strategy now that Google has set an internal 2029 deadline for quantum-resistant migration? So, TLDR, Google basically thinks that quantum resistance is going to be needed far sooner than previously thought, and that puts blockchains at risk, potentially, is the word on the street. Jay?
Oh, yes. This is a great question. I saw a lot of chatters, right, on X about, this quantum threat, not just from the Theta community, but from almost everyone in the blockchain industry and even outside of that, right? Indeed, it's a big news that Google announced this quantum computing breakthrough, which will significantly lower the number of physical qubits that is required to break ECDSA, which is the elliptic curve-based signature scheme used by many blockchains, not just Theta, but also those large cap coins like Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana, right? So this is not a challenge that only Theta is facing, but something that the entire crypto industry, right, need to find a solution. And this is even go beyond crypto, right? But think about your bank, right? So when you connect with it, you do this, SSL, and which will involve, a curve signature, and then you might have crypto, but you also might have, considerable amount of saving in your bank, right? So it's not just the crypto industry is coping with that, but also the traditional banking and even the government and all that. It's all hand on deck effort, right, to prevent, this new computing. This computing paradigm can make harm to the existing systems, right? So as everyone is trying to find a solution, that we are not alone. So we are closely following the development in the industry. In particular, I'm aware that Ethereum Foundation, right, they already have an initiative to look at all the layer in the stack and see that which part will be vulnerable quantum computing and what should be the solution, right? So they have a pretty detailed plan to cover all the layers in the blockchain stack. And then once we have a mature solution adopted by those leading tier 1 chains, then we'll consider our next move, right? So we will see what's the proper next step for Theta.
Yeah, I just jump into that and say, to kind of take an optimistic note, there's safety in numbers. This has been a talking point for the industry for as long as it's existed, and that should be a kind of some sun on the horizon, right? The industry is on it, and like Jay said, it goes far beyond just crypto. So, good news if in the darkness. Next question is, why has there been almost a year without an AMA, and is token price a focus for the Theta team? Spicy.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if it's been a year, Wes. I think our last one was Eurocon back last September, October, was it?
September, I think. So yeah, it has been about 6 months or so. Although I don't know if, I know we live streamed Theta Eurocon. I don't know if a VOD was ever posted afterward by the Eurocon team. If so, it's possible if people who didn't tune in live weren't able to catch it afterwards. So definitely like this one today, got to make sure these are recorded so people can check them out afterward.
For sure. And I think moving forward, I think traditionally we've had about 2 to 3 AMAs per year, but we'll look at that and see if at least, we definitely got to get this recorded and shared with everyone in the community. And so the second part of the question is the token price of focus for the team. And I think I said this before in the previous AMAs, with the new administration, with all the developments, prior to that, our comment was we never comment on token prices for regulatory reasons. But now we are, and we are able to, and of course, the answer is yes. The entire team is very focused, compensated with tokens. So as with anybody else, right, anyone holding our tokens, when the price is down 90%, so is that same impact on everybody on the team. So, for us, there's sort of 2 main elements, right? We think about a lot of external factors that we can control, but there's a lot of elements that we can, and those are the ones that we're focused on. And so, for us, it's heads down execution. A lot of these, partnerships are recently announced. I think yesterday, some of you may have seen our new validator came on, Cloudation, which is Alibaba Cloud partner. And by the way, all of the validation services, validation partnerships for Alibaba is handled by Cloudation, and you'll see that if you look at their background. They work with I think it is at least about half a dozen or maybe closer to 8 different layer 1 chains. So behind the scenes, I can say Jay and the team, this particular validator, if you check, if you track our validators on some place like Guardian Monitor, actually went live about 2 months ago, so we just didn't announce it. So we've been working on that. We're working with them for a greater part of the last 4 to 5 months, at least, probably going to half a year now. And there's a lot of background work also that's being done with the Alibaba Cloud and their AI team. And so, there's an announcement or a non-announcement. I can't say specifically what we are going to be announcing, but hopefully soon, some really exciting work that's coming out of their AI labs. We think there's a huge opportunity with our distributed network in being able to show that some things can not only be done effectively on our distributed RTX consumer grade GPUs, but it can be done even better, and that's really an exciting part. So so the short answer is the token price is hugely important to us. Those things are under our control, and that's what we're working on, and that's what we have to execute on.
Awesome. We might have time for some community questions. Let's go with which one here?
I
Big
think-
Pepper Joe. So carry
Yeah,
on.
I was going to say, Josh, I think earlier I saw a question that came through asking whether we'd be able to make this private equity raise available for investment by individuals, as well as by these large funds. And the answer is it's actually a little bit tricky, right? So one of the reasons that many startups, right, tech startups, raise from traditional venture capital and private equity firms is for all sorts of regulatory. You have to be accredited investor at the very least, but there's a number of other requirements as well. Filing SEC exemptions, right, for instance. And anytime that we do these large equity rounds with these institutions, these filings are done with the SEC, which we did, by the way, for instance, with our Series A round of financing way back when, before we launched the token back in 2017. And even with the private token sale that we did, some of you may remember, been around long enough, at the end of 2017, early 18, when we did the private token sale, which you recall we actually canceled our ICO, so we did not sell to the public. The private sale was also filed SEC exemption with the SEC. And we believe now, looking back and working with our counsel, that is one of the reasons that we never got into the crosshair with the regulatory bodies and SEC. And so that's a long answer to your question, but it's a good question. So we'll likely stay with these accredited, regulated VCs and private equity firms or enterprises.
Awesome. Were there any more that took your eye? I think I've lost the questions. I can't see anything.
I saw a few more questions about Coinbase and Kraken, and I think those are questions that come up often, right? Basically on every AMA, and I think we also, I made a comment that in the past AMA that we like to be on every US exchange, and that continues to be our hope and our goal. We have had some challenges, quite a few challenges with Coinbase in particular. I think without getting into it too much, but there's been at least a few project CEOs who went out there saying and publicly sharing some of their, let's put it, requirements. We were subject to the same requirements at the time. Didn't feel that was worth the 7 to actually 8 figures that they were asking for. So we're constantly communicating and talking to them. I think Kraken, on the other hand, is a little bit more interesting, to be honest. I think if there's an option, they may be potentially a more preferred one, and we are in conversations with them as well. But I think again, with the market, with an upturn in the market, we'll continue to get on. Crypto.com's been great. I think that's again a really great partner that we picked, and we want to be doing more stuff with them as well.
Awesome. There have been a few questions about the EPL partnership.
Yeah, I saw that come through as well. I think again, during AMAs, it's always very tricky, right? That particular EPL team, I think I mentioned, I think it was that in the Vegas DataCon, right? And we were in pretty close conversations in the final stretches with a particular EPL team, and we weren't able to come to a agreement on some pretty important points, and instead we ended up moving forward with Olympique de Marseille, as you all know, as our sort of marquee launch in the EU market. But having said that, I think there's a lot more teams that's super interesting that we're in conversations with. The NBA in particular is one that we love to have a little bit more inroads. They seem to be really on the cutting edge and really embracing AI and different types of agentic AI. One of the key criteria for us is how do we find the right partners to really showcase some, key, initiatives or key technologies, right? And good example was our, recently a month or two ago, a partnership with the esports team where we integrated, right, with their stores and be able to, for users to get rewarded, right, with T-Drop, right, as a reward mechanism by purchasing through the chatbot particular merchandising, particular items. And so that's really an example of the types of partners we're looking for. In the traditional sports merchandising is less so of a revenue driver, but for them it's a lot about ticketing, and in particular, how do we effectively integrate with ticketing? How do we bring ticketing, on chain? How do we close the loop? How do we reward users for going through that flow? And ultimately, how do we increase and maximize revenues, right? And being able to handhold a lot of these, VIP customers through that purchase process and not abandon their shopping carts at the last moment, right? So those are all the different conversations we're having. So, very, very, very important in some of these sports teams.
I did see a question in the chat about whether anyone in politics in DC knows about Theta. I couldn't join you guys, unfortunately, for the Blockchain Association, but Mitch, I assume you guys had some great meetings there in DC, right?
Yeah, we did, and in particular, if you recall, we had joined both the Digital Chamber and the more significant one, which is the Blockchain Association. They are one of the biggest lobbying groups, policy groups in DC. I think they work with over 100 different crypto companies, many of the top 100, and directly with a lot of the policymakers on all sorts of, regulation and whatnot. We joined, I believe it was late end of 2025. We were at their one of their annual conferences, and now really excited. We are participating in both their AI and DeepIn working groups, and that's really important, right? Because it a big part of this, recent, statement by the SEC and CFTC is the utility token category, and that's one that is obviously one that we believe we fit, squarely in, and particularly our tokens powering sort of this decentralized infrastructure, right, or decentralized, the DeepIn category is one that that's really key for us. So we're highly involved in that process.
Awesome. Should we call it a day?
Yeah, I think it's been good talking to and sharing with many of you. It is recorded, so particularly I saw some additional questions about the revenues and customers paying and ARR. You can rewind back to that section where I talked about the $1 million in revenues last year and 3 to 5x that in the next 12 to 18 months. And so some really important data and statistics that we shared there. So encourage everybody to look back at that.
And there is more to come over the next few weeks and months on the calendar, announcement-wise. So stay tuned for that. We can't give anything away, unfortunately, because otherwise the journalists won't cover us, and that's part of my job.
Great. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Yep.
Yeah.